Welcome to the Fire and Earth podcast with your hosts, Jason Mefford and Kathy Groover. Fire and Earth, giving you the keys to unlock your limitless potential.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Fire and Earth podcast. I am your co-host, Kathy Groover.
And I'm Jason Mefford. Welcome back, everybody.
Woohoo!
Well, today we thought we'd talk about falling off the wagon.
You gonna be okay?
Am I going to be okay if I fall off the wagon?
Yeah.
Maybe sprain something?
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of a funny term. It's usually related to, people that have an alcohol issue, right? And
That's not us, though, right? We're not. This isn't.
No. No.
Okay, good.
But but it kind of goes back to the point of it like a water wagon. And so people, switching from alcohol to drinking water, and so they're on the water wagon. But when somebody would relapse and start drinking again, they would call it they're falling off the wagon, right? So they'd made a conscious decision to actually stop drinking alcohol, deal with their alcoholism. But we relapse, and I've been thinking about this, and not from an alcoholic perspective, but just in general, how a lot of times we end up making plans, and then those plans don't go quite the way we expected. And this is a natural part of life. I don't know if you've ever felt like that, Kathy. Have you ever fallen off the wagon in some sort of sense?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Whether it's I'm going to start exercising every day. Oh, life happened, and now I have this deadline, or I have this thing. I mean, it's the whole the best laid plans, right? They're going to go awry at some point. And whether it's an athletic activity or a trip or a vacation or a project that you want to do, it's funny because I do my daily pauses. They're not so daily anymore. They're more like, bi-monthly pauses, but I still do them. And I had this whole one going about, I had a jigsaw puzzle. And I had done this daily pause around doing this jigsaw puzzle. And I got the whole edge put together because you have to do the edges first. That's just what you do. And I was missing 2 edge pieces. And I had to make this decision. Do I continue on with the puzzle knowing it's going to be incomplete? Or am I okay with that and I do the rest of the puzzle and fill it in? Well, I stopped the daily pauses around that. And a guy stopped me last week and he goes, "What happened? Did you finish the puzzle?" And I said, "No, I actually threw it away." And he started laughing and I went, "I threw it away. I made a different choice. I decided, no, I don't have the time for this. I am going to be irritated if I do this whole thing and it's missing pieces. So I made a different choice and I got rid of the puzzle." Maybe going forward later, I'll get a different puzzle, one that doesn't have 5 million teeny little microscopic pieces that is complete. But it's like I took a different turn and I decided that I had different priorities and that one of them was not taking up my dining room table with an incomplete puzzle. So it's about making those choices when something goes awry. How do you handle that? Yep. Which way do you turn?
Yeah, because it does all end up coming down to choices, right? And the reason why I wanted to kind of talk about this is, on a previous episode, I told people I was running a marathon. I put it on my calendar, right? I mean, that was a goal that I had. It's something that's on my bucket list, but then other things happened and I had to make choices, right? So, late last year, beginning of this year, I actually hurt myself. When I overextended a little bit, had some problems with my knees and my shins. And at that point, as it was getting closer and closer to the time of the marathon, I had to make a decision. Just like the jigsaw puzzle, do you just throw it away or do you keep trying to go and literally in this case, limp along, right, to try to force myself into doing that? Because I made a commitment to myself that I was going to do that. Mm-hmm. And so, at that point, then you have to kind of step back and stop, right? And so these were some of the things that were kind of going through my mind that I'm sure some of the listeners who have had similar experiences with, they plan to do something and then it doesn't quite work out. This is where we can end up going. And so I want to kind of talk about this and then maybe, put things in perspective for people, like you said, of making new choices and not realizing that we're a failure, we're, a fraud, we're a whatever word you want to throw out there because we didn't do everything that we said we were going to do. Right. So like I said, I mean, I got hurt, and I had to decide, do I continue to try to run every day and increase my mileage so that I can end up hitting that? And I had to stop and sit back and go, okay, it's on my bucket list. Before I die, I'm going to run a marathon. But does it have to be this year? No,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be this year. I'm still going to do it. And like I said, I had to make the choice, because from a health perspective, it would have hurt my body more to continue. Plus, there were some other things going on, right? Is that I have been trying to work more on my mental mindset.
Mhm.
And so, again, I have to make that choice between, do I spend the half an hour or hour a day running, or do I spend that half an hour or an hour a day working on my psychological and mental mindset?
Mhm.
And so for me, at this point in my life, I decided the mental mindset was more important. And I'm just going to push pause
Yeah.
on the marathon for now. I'm still going to run it probably next year,
Mhm.
maybe the year after. I haven't decided. I haven't put it on my calendar yet, but I'm still going to do it. Now, because I am not running, didn't run the marathon, do you think I'm a horrible person, Kathy?
Oh yeah.
Really? Dang,
No.
that was not the answer I was
No,
expecting.
in fact, as you were talking about that, I was thinking that exact thing. Now, when we decide, okay, I'm not going to do the puzzle, I'm going to throw it away, were there people that watched that episode of it and went, what a loser? We sometimes power through things because of these expectations of other people or the judgment of other people. So it's actually funny that you said, do you think I'm a horrible person? Because I was just thinking that. It's like there have been times where I said, I'm going to do this thing, and then I don't, because of either I decide not to, or it's not going to work, or something gets in the way. And I can see people kind of going, yeah, you were so going to run a marathon. They think you're lying about it. And it's like,
Right.
we need to give ourselves permission to, one, ignore those other people, but we need to give ourselves permission to make the best choice for us in that moment. And sometimes it is tossing out the puzzle, or not doing the marathon, or not making that meeting, or, people never know what's actually going on with us unless we tell them every detail, which we don't. It's none of their business anyway. So how do you pivot and switch into something else and not fall so strongly on, oh man, everyone's going to think I'm a loser, or da da da. Like, how do you do that? That takes a lot of self-awareness and a lot of self-strength to be able to fall off the wagon. So how do we not worry about what everyone's judgy about?
Well, that's the big thing, right? Because again, I was feeling some of those thoughts, right? Like, oh, I'm not only letting myself down, but what are other people going to think about me?
Ugh.
And here's the reality: nobody knows or cares. Right? Is most of the time we project, or we put things into our own mind
Yep.
that are not there. Right. And so before, we talked about fear, right? False expectations appearing real. So, I kind of had a fear of, oh, people might look at me and think, oh, Jason's a big loser. Look, he can't even do what he said he was going to do. He's a liar. He's a whatever. Right. But that's not what people are thinking.
Yeah.
Right. Most people are busy enough in their own life that they're not even thinking about what we're doing.
No.
Right.
I have never once woken up in the middle of the night and gone, did Jason run that marathon? What a bum. I can't believe well, I'll think about it tonight, though. When I'm awake in the middle of the night, I'll ponder you. I'll hold you in my brain. But
Yeah.
here's the other thing. Frankly, it is none of our business what anybody else thinks of us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We can't change it. I mean, God, did I care when I was a kid? I cared so strongly what other people thought, because that's sort of that 7th, 8th, 9th grade thing, which was the most hellish time of anybody's life. We cared so much what people thought about us. That's the time we were actually building who we were and getting those ego parts in place. Now, as adults, it's none of our business. It's really none of our business what anybody thinks about us. So good for you. I'm proud of you for making that choice, because, as a massage therapist, I still have so many people who they are really limping along. Like,
Yeah.
I've got to do this marathon, and they've got things torn and they've got things broken, and they just run through it. And it's like, okay, that's a poor choice at that point. Are you sacrificing long-term gain for the short-term poof? Are you playing the long game, or are you playing the short game? And if you injure yourself trying to do this thing now, that might end your running career. That might mean you can't walk anymore. That mean, you have to weigh those options of, is it so important that I do this thing that might hurt me for other things? Or do I play the long game, do the smart choice, and say no to something that you had previously said yes to?
Well, and I think, because you asked the question, what do you do when you get into that point? I think we've kind of talked about a couple of those, but maybe to kind of summarize, for people that it kind of went, quickly as we're talking there, because, the first thing, like you said, is kind of stop and reassess.
Mm-hmm.
Was that thing really that important? Is it a short-term or long-term thing, right? So in the case of the puzzle or the marathon, right? That's something really in the short term. The long term, it really probably doesn't matter. It's still going to happen anyway. So at that point, we can stop and say, okay, probably not that big a deal, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we're worried about what other people might be thinking, if we're fearful about that, then again, we kind of stop and should say, well, you know what? It doesn't really matter what other people think. Now, like you said, a lot of times we revert back to that 7th or 8th grade, kid
Mm-hmm.
that does care tremendously about what other people think, but we have to have that self-compassion for ourselves
Mm-hmm.
and realize that your self-worth has nothing to do with what other people think of you.
Yeah.
Right. It has to come internally. And so that's the point where, you have to have compassion for yourself and realize, just because I didn't run the marathon, just because you didn't finish the puzzle, doesn't mean you're a horrible person.
Right.
That was just a choice. That's an externality that has nothing to do with your physical or your sense of worth or should.
Yeah.
Right. But a lot of times we do end up kind of tying that into it, and we shouldn't. Right. And so, those are some of the things that you can start to kind of to think about and step back and realize that, it probably wasn't or isn't that big of a deal. And just honestly, sometimes we have to make choices.
Yeah.
Because like you said, some of your clients who have because one of the things I actually learned just recently in a book I'm reading is hurt versus injured. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Which I think is an interesting concept. And so the guy was bringing up, he says, my coach, when I was in high school, he was playing football, and he said, you'd get hurt on the field, right? You take a big hit or whatever, and you're lying out on the ground, and his coach would come up and say, are you hurt or are you injured?
Mm-hmm.
And the difference between hurt and injured is, hurt means, oh, you just got the air knocked out of you, but I'm okay to go, coach, put me back in. Injured means there's actually, physically something wrong, like you tore your Achilles or, something like that, where you're physically injured. And the more that you try to do that, the more you're actually hurting yourself in the long term as well as the short term. And so, kind of stopping and thinking about that too is, well, is this something that's a hurt thing or is this an injured thing?
Mm-hmm.
And if it's a hurt thing, come on, move on. Let's
Shake
just
it
keep
off.
going, shake it off, get back in there. But if it's an injured thing, like mine was literally an injured thing with my knees, that if I would have continued to do that, it would have had longer term impacts on me as well.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. I'm going to throw a twist on this.
Ooh.
I'm an only child, as we know.
Mm-hmm.
When someone tells me they are going to do something, when someone promises me they're going to come visit, they're going to run the marathon with me, they're going to whatever, and then something happens and they can't. Oh, this is a tough one for me because I'm very literal. So if you tell me I'm calling you at 2 and I arrange my day to take your call at 2,
Mm-hmm.
and then at 2 you go, oh, I can't. There's a part of me that goes, but so that takes compassion from my part. That takes understanding. It takes patience. It takes honing those things in myself to be patient with other people when they have to not make a decision like that. A woman contacted me. She's like, hey, I just read this article about you. I'd really love you I'd love to have you on my radio show. When can we chat? I said, I can chat this Friday. She has this whole hour-long thing. And I said, but I'll be very honest with you. I do not have an hour available to come into your studio and do this till the end of May, beginning of June.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't hear anything back from her. And I was like, you know, so I reached out again. I said, hey, you know, wanted to see if you still wanted to get together. Didn't hear anything. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe she doesn't want to wait. Maybe something happened, whatever. I get a message from her yesterday saying, I'm so sorry I didn't get back to you. A friend of mine had been missing for 3 days and they just found out she was murdered. Like, what? Holy crap. Of course you didn't get back to me. You wait as long as you need to. You know, we never know what's going on in somebody else's life that they do have to cancel these things. So we can't take it personally.
Yep.
You know, the fact that the boyfriend couldn't come down this week doesn't mean he doesn't want to see me. It means his daughter was in school and he couldn't get out of taking her someplace. You know, so it's like we also have to be patient with others
Mm-hmm.
and recognize when someone seriously has an issue that's come up, or when they're, you know, how do you decide, well, they've canceled on me 17 times. Maybe they just don't want to do that thing. You know, so there is that place of balance. This is why this is a twist, because on one hand, it's like you have to remain patient and compassionate for others. And on the other hand, you do have to act, you know, turn on your bullshit meter and be like, look, you canceled on me 12 times. Clearly you don't want this date, or whatever it is. So it's, you know.
Yeah, hopefully you would learn before the 12th time. But like you said, right. Has it been my problem? But that twist is interesting too, right? Because like you said, is it's things are going to come up. Okay, I mean they will end up coming up, but when patterns start to develop,
Mm-hmm.
that's when it becomes the issue, right? And so again, you know, if we take our falling off the wagon thing, hey, if you fall off the wagon once or twice, probably not a big deal, right? If you fall off 20 times, as long as you still keep getting up and getting on the wagon and you're still trying, you're still getting closer to where you want to go, right? And so it's not to make an excuse, right, for
Mm-hmm.
not having integrity or not showing up and being the person that you want to be, but sometimes things happen and we just have to be compassionate in those times.
Yeah.
Because like you said, if you haven't, you know, shown up for the 12th time for a meeting, well, that says something about you, right? That you have some sort of commitment issue and you're letting other people down at that point. But when things happen, like my friend went missing and she's murdered, well, holy crap, are you going to hold that against her? No, right? I mean, that's totally something that you can appreciate and have compassion for her as well, because those things happen, you know. And it's like, I mean, as we've talked kind of off camera as friends and everything, there's things that come up, you know. As we get older, we have issues with parents and other things that just kind of come up as you're caring for elderly parents, or, you know, other personal things that do come up. They shouldn't be the norm, right? But you can't fully anticipate everything, and sometimes those things are going to happen. So
well, and then you start to feel bad, because I know you and I trying to coordinate our schedules
mm-hmm.
is crazy sometimes. It's like we come up with a date and then, oh, I can't do it because I got a client, and then you've got a meeting, and then my computer dies, then my dad's in the hospital, and then it's like sometimes even you and I have gone back and forth like 10 times trying to figure out when we can get together and do this, but we know we're not jerking each other around. It's like this stuff seriously comes up. So there is that patience and that compassion and that understanding of, okay, she has to cancel last minute, or, oh, he had this thing come up, you know, because we have that relationship. We have that connection between the two of us where we know we're not bullshitting each other.
And it goes back to that short-term, long-term thing too, right? Is we know that we're committed to each other. We have a vision and we're showing up to try to serve other people, you know, by doing this podcast. And so it's something that is important to us. And yes, sometimes in the short term, you know, you're going to be traveling. I'm in Boston next week. I think you said you're doing a trifecta next week. So you'll be in 3 cities next week. And sometimes in the short term, you know, things may not work out that particular week, but we know that we're committed to doing this, and we will find, or we will make time, right? Because I don't like the word found time, just because there is no such thing as found time. We all have 168 hours in a week. We just choose how we're going to spend that time. And so we have to take or make time to do those things that are important for us.
Yeah.
So,
or do those things that are important for other people. because
Yeah, because
sometimes it is about doing something for somebody else as well. And we sacrifice things that we might want to do because we want to help that other person, because we need to work at the food bank, or so-and-so needs a ride, or I'm going to pick up those kids, or, I mean, it's like we do that stuff too. And that's important as well, is to have that selflessness to give to other people when they need something, when maybe they've fallen off the wagon and they need our help. Because both of us are in the caring industry to a certain extent, as a speaker and as a talking to people about risk and talking to people about stress. And, we are there for other people, and we will make those sacrifices. At least I think we will. Won't we? We will.
well, no, we do. I mean, because, it's like that. When I have a client who is I just talked to one this week, he's having some political issues with his board. There's some things that are going on and some other stuff. And so he's like, Jason, how do I deal with this? Right. What landmines am I going to step on? How do I do this report? Who do I send it to? How do I do this? It's like, well, at that time I needed to kind of drop what else I was doing because he needed my help in the short term. And in the long term, giving up whatever I was doing in the short term is helping to strengthen that relationship with him as well.
Right.
It's helping him in the short term, which he needs, but in the long term for our relationship, helps out as well. And so again, like you said, sometimes we have to give up a little bit of maybe what we had planned or what we want to do in order to help out and be there for other people as well.
Right.
You still have to take time for yourself, but again, it's a short-term, long-term thing that you're still trying to get where you're going in the long term, while making those decisions that are actually conscious decisions, right? And I think that's one of the important things too, is to realize that if you're consciously deciding, it's okay, right? Like I said, if I'm choosing not to run for a couple months because I'm working on my mindset, right? I'm choosing between the two, and life ultimately comes down to choices.
Yes.
Because we can't do everything all the time, and we have to make some of those choices, and it's okay, right? Because again, if you're thinking about the long term, if you're thinking about where you want to go, and what's really important to you and to the people that you love, then you're gonna make the right choices. And sometimes we don't. So have compassion for yourself at that point. And if you need to, literally give yourself a hug. If nobody else is around. I read a book about self-compassion last year. And at first when I heard that, I thought, that is the hokiest thing I have ever heard of in my life. That is like, give yourself a hug. But no, literally, it actually scientifically, in the way the brain works, literally giving yourself a hug and touching yourself that way actually does change the way you feel. If nobody else is around to give you a hug, give yourself a hug.
Okay. I'll do it right now.
Do it right now. Here we go. Self-hug, everybody.
It does feel good. You can also give yourself a Heimlich maneuver. I learned that yesterday.
Okay. Yep. In
case you're choking while you're hugging yourself. But you bring up a really good point about what is important to you. And it's about making choices. And what do you want? I don't think we ask ourselves enough, what do we want? We talk all the time about things we don't want, but we don't actually identify what we do want. And I know I have one client, she's older. I go to her house to give her a massage. I have very few people I do outcall. I just don't have the energy for that anymore at my age.
Lugging the table and everything, yeah.
Yeah, oh God, it's exhausting. But this woman's a little bit older. She could come to me. It's just easier for me to come to her, and I lug the table in and she gets on the table, But there was one day where she's like, do you want to stay and have some pie? And I'm kind of looking at my clock. It's like, I had to get to another client and I was going to get on the phone. I was going to do some emails and I stopped for a second. And it's like, I don't know how long this woman's going to be around. And how often do you get to sit with a German woman in her 80s in her kitchen to have pie? And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to have some freaking pie. And I sat there with her just for like 10 or 15 minutes because I had to get to my next thing. But it's like, I made a choice to not do those things that, could I be doing emails? Sure. I mean, I know probably everyone that's watching this could never stop their to-do list, work 24/7 and still not get through everything they could, should, need to be doing. But I made a different choice. I sat there and I had pie and we had tea and we had a couple laughs. And then I left, because it's like, in that moment, I did that, I hate the word pivot, but I did that pivot to, I'm going to make a different choice.
Yeah.
All these corporate buzzwords drive me crazy. We'll put a pin in that and come back to it. But
Yeah.
we should do a whole show on just phrases we hate.
Oh, yeah, there's quite a few. And
Yeah.
what they actually mean versus what
Right.
people think they
Ping me,
mean.
that means it's a submarine thing. Anyway,
Yeah.
so we'll put a pin in that. We'll come back later. We'll circle back. We'll put that on we'll park that. Oh my God, I hate them all. But anyway, I made this different choice to sit with this woman and have pie, rather than doing those other things that I could have been doing. And the emails can wait.
Mhm.
I didn't necessarily fall off the wagon for not doing the emails. I made a different choice. Just like I looked at the puzzle and went, this is not important to me. I don't want to do this. I'm going to do something else instead with this time. So I chose that short-term gain of having this relationship with this woman over pie in her kitchen, as opposed to sitting in my car and furiously doing emails, which I could do anytime.
Right.
So sometimes it's about making that choice in the moment. This thing presents itself and you go, oh, do I do that thing I had planned, or do I take advantage of this opportunity that might not come up again? So I think we have to be flexible as well. It is about choice, but it's also about being spontaneous and flexible. I'm not the most, I'm actually pretty spontaneous, but I'm so schedule driven. Sometimes it takes me that knock on the head to get me out of that schedule to realize, okay, Groover, you can sit down for a second.
Yeah. Well, and I think to be able to help in making those decisions in the short term, and this is a whole nother episode for another time, but being clear and having alignment on what you value,
Yeah.
and what really is important to you, because at that point, again, when the lady says, would you stay and have some pie? Well, obviously you've developed a relationship with her over time.
Mhm.
And again, a lady in her 80s, they're lonely,
Yes.
and so, having an extra 10 or 15 minutes with you is a big deal for her.
Mhm.
Right. For you, it's probably a minor inconvenience because, like you said, well, you're not going to maybe return a phone call or answer a couple of emails that can probably wait anyway. Right. Having pie with her is something that couldn't wait at that point. And I'm just guessing, since I kind of know you too, that you like people and you care about people. Oh,
Okay.
yeah, right. So at that point, yeah, a little bit, right? So at that point, when she says, Kathy, would you stay and have some pie? You had to make a decision, but it really wasn't that hard of a decision for you
Right.
because you know what you value and what's most important to you.
Mhm.
And the 15 minutes for her was a better way to spend your time than doing some of those other things.
Yeah, absolutely. It's choice.
It's
Very
choice.
much choice.
It's choice. All right. Well, that's probably a good place to kind of wrap up for the day, right? So, okay, let's see here. What do we talk about? If you fall off the
Pie.
wagon, well, we
We
talked
talked
about
about
pie.
pie.
We didn't talk about any animals in this episode, though.
No, we got pie and booze.
We got pie and booze.
It's a complete episode right there.
There you go. Right. So yeah, if you've made plans and they don't go the way that you expected, if things come up and you're at that point when you have to kind of make a choice, right, is to decide, and again, think about short term versus long term, think about what you value
Mhm.
and what would be the best use of your time at that particular point in time, and just have some compassion for yourself, because don't worry about other people thinking you're a loser if you didn't do something, because either one, they don't even realize it or care. And the second point is what other people think about you has nothing to do with your self-worth and your self-value.
And it's none of your business.
Yeah. And so just have some compassion for yourself, make the best choices that you can, again, based on what you value, and where you think it is and where you need to get in the long term. And that's what's most important.
Yeah.
If you fall off, get up, dust yourself off, make a new decision, and move forward.
Yeah. And have compassion and patience for those other people who might fall off the wagon and inadvertently affect you. Whether we have to cancel the podcast, or they can't make it down for that trip, or they can't make the dinner party, or you decide to have pie instead of returning emails. Have compassion for those other people and be patient with them. Also keeping your BS meter on to watch for patterns in case they're actually really just trying to get out of something.
Yep, exactly.
It's a place of balance. But yeah, so go forth, get back on the wagon, be gentle with yourself, be gentle with others. I'm Kathy Gruber. I can be reached at kathygruber.com.
And I'm Jason Mefford. I can be reached at jasonmefford.com. So go forth, have a great rest of your day. If you fall off, get back on and make this life amazing. And we will see you on another episode of the Fire and Earth podcast.
See ya.
See ya.